Hi there, it's January the 24th, and today we're continuing in our journey through the good news according to Matthew in chapter 15, going from verse 29, and we're going through to chapter 16 and verse 12. Jesus has sat down on a mountain up overlooking Galilee, and again many people come to him bringing their sick, their needy, and they sit at his feet, they lay them at his feet, and out of his compassion he heals them all. But they've been with him for 3 days and they're in danger of going really hungry. And Jesus' compassion, again, this visceral, gut level compassion arises in him. He looks at the people and he says, we need to feed these people. The disciples, of course, saying, well, practically they need to go away. But Jesus says, how many loaves do you have? Now, Matthew's already recorded the feeding of the 5,000, but this is another situation. And so perhaps the disciples are used to this by now. They say, well, actually, we have 7 loaves and a few little fish. And then Jesus feeds all of these people, 4,000 of them this time, not including women and children. And they take up 7 baskets of leftovers. So a very similar situation. And this is Jesus again showing his provision. It's Jesus actually on the mountain, which symbolizes God's meeting with Israel, if you like, at Sinai, and also the bread that is being fed like the manna in the wilderness. So Jesus is bringing healing, he's also bringing provision. It's a sign of Messiah's provision, a sign again for Matthew writing as a Jew to Jews, as a sign full of meaning for the people. And speaking of signs, at the beginning of chapter 16, the Pharisees and the Sadducees come, and it says they test Jesus. They're there to test him. And they ask Jesus for a miracle. They want Jesus to do a miracle. Now, it's worth noting here that Pharisees and Sadducees were 2 really opposing factions in Judaism. The Pharisees were very strong on the law and the keeping of the law. The Sadducees didn't believe in a resurrection. They said they didn't see resurrection in the Torah. But the Sadducees were very strong politically, and they were aligned with the king. And so they were much more pragmatic in their approach. But they're not really together. But here, they both come and they test Jesus and they ask him for a sign. Jesus says, I'm not giving you a sign. The only sign I'm giving you is the sign of the prophet Jonah. And of course, Jonah is the one who is taken into the fish for 3 days and nights. And Jesus has previously referred to this and said that the Son of Man is going to be taken into the heart of the earth. So he's still pointing to that. And he says, you're always looking for a sign. Actually, look at the signs around you. Look at the skies. You can look at the skies and tell what the weather's going to be. Why can't you tell what God is doing? And he sends them away with a flea in their ear. Then he gets into the boat and he goes with his disciples, and while he's with them he says to his disciples, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now it's really interesting, the disciples think he's having a go at them for having forgotten to bring bread to feed all these thousands of people. They see it on a superficial level, in a sense. They see it on a very practical level, but Jesus is talking about something. He's using this as a parable. Interestingly, he's earlier used yeast as a picture of the kingdom. He says the kingdom is like some yeast that works its way through a whole batch of dough. So perhaps it's a little confusing for the disciples, but Jesus explains he's not talking about bread. He's not having a go at them because they forgot bread. He's talking about the insidious teaching, the insidious ideology of both Pharisees and Sadducees, which draws people away from the true heart of God, from the heart behind the law, the heart behind the Torah. And Jesus wants them to understand, to beware of that kind of externalism that both in the Pharisees and the Sadducees will miss the matters of the heart. We need to be constantly on guard ourselves that we are not just doing things outwardly for the sake of it, somehow to try and make an impression on either God or people. It's actually about our heart being close. God wants that heart-to-heart, intimate fellowship with us. And so we need to be continually seeking him to live in us by his Spirit, so we can know that we also will have that bread to give to others constantly when it's needed. Have a very good January the 24th.